coronavirus across Wales. We are now making concerted steps to resume something approaching a new normal while living alongside coronavirus. Let me end by saying again, this public health crisis is not yet over. Through all our efforts, we have succeeded in bringing the fire of coronavirus under control. But that fire is not yet out. We all need to continue to play our part, to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities. Please continue to stay local and to keep Wales safe. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. Happy now to take some questions. And going first this afternoon to Felicity Evans at BBC Wales.
First Minister, thank you very much indeed. Please, could you answer this question in English and in Welsh? On the maintenance of the stay local provision for at least another 2 weeks, this isn't particularly helpful for retailers who are out of town. In fact, the CEO of Sofa has called it a toothless decision to say that people can start visiting non-essential retailers if you're also going to keep stay local. Given that the COVID alert level has been reduced for the UK as a whole, why not get rid of stay local now?
Because stay local remains a very important part of our armoury against coronavirus here in Wales. We are keen to bring it to an end in 2 weeks' time. But once we bring it to an end, then people in Wales will be able to travel where they like right across Wales. And that will mean that communities who have seen very few visitors will have to be prepared to welcome visitors again. And to do that safely, without creating a different sort of public health difficulty, we need to give those authorities time to make those preparations. Simple things like public toilets will need to be reopened in our visitor economy. Car parks will need to be reopened. Our national parks need time to prepare. Our local authorities need time to prepare. Our visitor attractions will need to reopen in ways where they are confident and the people who visit them are confident that all the measures are in place to safeguard the health and well-being of their staff and of their customers. That will take a short period of time, 2 more weeks. In the meantime, non-essential retail will be able to open, and for many, many non-essential retail outlets, there is an ample population within the 2-mile radius already. And our expectation from the sector is that they will build up the reopening of the sector over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So this is a powerful set of measures and a powerful set of signals. The stay local message remains important here in Wales. Coronavirus is not over, as we are learning today from outbreaks in North Wales. 2 more weeks, one last lap, we can do this together, and then, provided everything remains as we hope it will, we will be able to make that part of the coronavirus crisis something behind us. So just I ddweud yn Gymraeg, mae'r pethau cymdeithasol yn dal I fod rhywbeth pwysig yn popeth ni'n neud â gilydd I cael gwared ar coronavirus. Ni ddim yn y sefyllfa ble ni'n gallu ddweud mae'r coronavirus wedi diflannu, yma yng Nghymru ni'n gwybod mae hwnna ddim yn wir. So, pethefnos nesaf I gweithio dy gilydd I cadw yn lleol. Mae hwnna yn mynd I roi cyfleon i'r awdurdodau lleol ond pobl eraill I baratoi mewn ardaloedd yng Nghymru sydd ddim wedi weld bobl yn teithio I fewn dros y 2 mis diwetha. Mae pwysig I cael yr amser yna I paratoi, I roi pethau yn ei le, I ail agor ein economi twristiaeth enghraifft mewn ffordd diogel. A gyda'r siopau menwerthu, maen nhw'n gallu ailagor ar dydd Llun nesaf. Mae lot o bobl yn barod I wneud hynny, ond dwi'n siŵr bydd y sector yn tyfu dros y 2 wythnos nesaf. Ni'n ailagor ein economi, ni'n wneud fwy na ni'n gallu wneud dros yr 2 wythnos a fwy na hynny diwetha, a dwi'n siŵr bydd hwnna yn help yn ein economi ledled Cymru.
Diolch. Can I turn to test, trace and protect, which will be key now that you are stepping on the gas, as it were, in terms of opening up? The speed of processing of tests is vital for this, and the target is as many as possible processed within 24 hours. Yet, according to the figures published by Public Health Wales, the performance on that is the worst it's ever been. For population testing units, fewer than half of results are coming back within 24 hours, and there has been a week-on-week decline every single week since the 26th of April. Do you accept that that is inadequate?
Well, we definitely accept that we need to do more and to do better. Actually, the system is still managing to process 9 out of 10 tests within 48 hours, despite the fact that many more tests are being done every week. To sustain that performance when you've got more and more to do is by itself, I think, commendable, and you can be sure that the people who work in our system are working as hard as they can to turn the test results around as fast as they can. But we have a series of measures that we want to take now to improve the speed of the turnaround of tests, because it is very important as part of the test, trace, protect system. That will, I feel confident, lead to improvement in the turnaround times, even while we go on extending the number of tests, making more available, doing more to make sure that if there are local outbreaks of the disease, we're there quickly, we're on top of it quickly, and we can help people to put that right. Thank you, Felicity. I'll go to Adrian Masters at ITV Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. I wonder if I could ask you for some more clarity on the 5 mile rule. I think you alluded to this in your answer to Felicity, but I wonder if you could be explicit. Can you only go to shops within 5 miles of your home? And related to that, can you be fined if you breach the 5 mile rule? At the moment, the stay local rule is enforceable by fines, but with just 2 weeks to go and with a number of exemptions that you've mentioned, can you still be fined for breaching it?
So the 5 miles is advice and not a rule. The rule is to stay local, and people have to interpret that rule in their own circumstances and the very different geographies of Wales. That remains a rule, that remains in regulations, that people must stay local for the next 2 weeks. There is an exemption that we are highlighting today, that if you need to make a visit for compassionate reasons beyond your locality, that is allowable in Wales for the next 2 weeks, and hopefully on the 6th of July, in 2 weeks' time, we will be able to lift this rule altogether. In the meantime, all the enforcement arrangements, including fines, of course, do remain in place because these are regulations in Wales. Stay local is not advice, it is a requirement. How do you know what is local? Well, the 5 mile distance is a rule of thumb. That's not in the regulations. That's guidance for people to get a sense of what staying local might mean.
Thank you. And you've given some indication to the tourism industry when it can think about reopening, but not the hospitality industry. And it seems there's not much point in going somewhere to stay in some accommodation if the pubs and restaurants in that area aren't open. And people within the sector say that as a result of the lack of clarity from you on this today, thousands of jobs are now hanging by their fingertips. What can you say to them?
Well, first of all, I don't myself think at all that there aren't very, very many good reasons for visiting the tourism economy in Wales for all the things that it has to offer beyond hospitality. And it's just important to say again to people, there's only so much headroom we have at any one of these 3-week reviews. If we do more than we have announced today, the risk that the virus would spread in Wales again would be significant. And that's why we have gone to the maximum of our capacity, and that does not include being able to say to hospitality that we are yet in a position where it can plan to reopen. We will use the 3 weeks to talk carefully with the hospitality industry to see what prospects there may be beyond this 3-week review. But we've used every bit of headroom we have to lift as many restrictions as we can, to give as many messages as we can to those parts of our economy that can safely reopen in the next 3 weeks, and to plan to do that beyond. Hospitality is not yet in that position. We will use the time to talk carefully with that industry, and when it is safe to do so, but not before, we will have plans to reopen that part of our economy as well. Adrian, thank you. Over to Mark Hutchins at 5 Live.
Thank you, First Minister. I believe I'm right in saying that Wales is now the only part of the UK where people living alone can't bubble up with another household indoors, and yet they will be able to take their chances with strangers in a queue in a shopping centre. So when will that change?
Well, those two risks will be very, very different from one another. We looked quite carefully to see whether we could make a decision about extended household arrangements as part of this review. As you will have seen, there is a very comprehensive set of decisions and changes that we are introducing as from Monday, and came to the conclusion at about the middle of last week that it simply wasn't possible to make a decision on extended households in the way that we wanted to do it in Wales, in a way where we have all the information, all the advice, and to do it in an orderly way. It simply wasn't possible to do that alongside everything else that I've announced today. But next week, we will begin to get that advice. Our minds will turn to that issue. We don't have to wait for 3 weeks to make a change. We can make a change at any point in the 3-week cycle if we are in a position to do so. And there are a number of issues which we are going to concentrate on from the start of next week, and bubbling extended households will be one of them.
So to clarify, what you're saying there is within 3 weeks you could have something to announce about bubbling up. And also, a number of people have asked me about what you mean by compassionate grounds for travelling more than 5 miles. Can you give us some more clarity about that? And does that mean you could meet someone indoors or only outdoors?
Thank you, Mark. So on the first one, just to be clear, what I'm saying is we don't have to wait for 3 weeks to make a decision. So if we are able to make a decision on extended households before 3 weeks is up, we'll make that decision and announce it. On the compassionate point, well, again, as we move into the new world where there are fewer restrictions, we will have to rely more and more on people making sensible decisions for themselves. But let me give you an example of what we mean, and it's a live example from the postbag that I get. So if someone writes to me and says, I have a relative that lives beyond my local area. They don't need food because the neighbour shops for them. They don't need medicines because the pharmacy delivers it to them. But they haven't seen anybody from their family for nearly 3 months. And that's having a really poor impact on their welfare and well-being. You will now be able to make a visit to that person because that's a compassionate reason for doing so. And we will provide further guidance, and people will have to come to judgments of their own. When you make that visit, it should be outside. It should be at a 2-metre distance. It should observe all the rules that we have already set out. But for compassionate reasons, if you have someone who is in that position, whose well-being is suffering because of the impact of coronavirus, and you need to make a visit to them, you will be able to do that from Monday onwards. Mark, thank you. I'll go to Andy Davis.
Thank you. First Minister, just listening to your comments about the hospitality sector there. There are pubs, restaurants, cafes all over Wales desperate to know what it means for them. You said that, I think you said just now, that discussions are going to take place. Well, why haven't those discussions been taking place over the last few weeks? And isn't it fair to those and other businesses in Wales now to give them a clear indicative timetable of best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, in order for them to plan financially for the next 6 months?
Andy, coronavirus in Wales is not over. Coronavirus is still there in every part of Wales. And saying you must give people certainty in an inherently uncertain world, where I do not know and you do not know and that sector does not know what coronavirus will be doing in 6 weeks, let alone 6 months. That would be a very false certainty indeed. Of course, we have had discussions with the sector over recent weeks, and our conclusion is that we cannot include them within the package of measures that we have set out for the next 3 weeks and for the 3 weeks beyond that. But we will continue to discuss with them. If, for example, it is possible to reopen some parts of that industry in the outdoors, it may be possible to do that before we could open parts of that industry where people would be asked to congregate inside with all the additional risks we know that would take place. But there are only so many steps you can take at any one time. If you are determined to do this as we are, in a careful, cautious, orderly and considered way. I've not been able to say today to the hospitality industry that there are imminent plans for it to reopen, but I have been able to give indications for non-domestic retail, to the tourism sector, to hairdressing and others, and that has used up all the headroom we have for now. If there's more headroom in future, we will be talking to the hospitality industry about how it can safely reopen here in Wales.
You've said often that scientific evidence is guiding your strategy and that science presumably is behind the current 5-mile limit. What would you say to those people in the more remote tourism areas of Wales who might worry now about what happens when that 5-mile limit is lifted? And what does the scientific evidence suggest might happen to the spread of the virus when that happens? Ironically, some of the questions I've had to answer have been on whether the 5-mile guidance is fair to rural Wales. But in many ways, the regulation has been there to protect those parts of Wales that have had almost no coronavirus from visitors coming and bringing it with them. What the science tells us now is that the circulation of the virus in Wales has fallen to a point where the risk of that happening is low enough for us to be able to move forward. It doesn't mean there's no risk at all. It can't mean that because the virus is still here in Wales. But whereas at the height of the pandemic, 1 in every 1,000 people in Wales was probably infectious, that's probably today as low as 1 in 10,000 and maybe lower than that as well. But it's why I said in my introductory statement that the tourism industry must now use the next 3 weeks to work with those local communities. There will be visitors coming back and we want to welcome those visitors to Wales. And local communities will have to be helped to feel confident that that is safe and right for them. And those many, many people from those local communities who work in the tourism economy will now be able to look forward to salvaging something from the tourism season here in Wales. Drawi Adam Hale of PA.
Prif Weinidog. You're now reopening shops, restarting schools, allowing unlimited travel, potentially welcoming back tourists from outside the country. It takes around 3 weeks. Given all you've said before about taking cautious steps, opening one thing at a time, seeing how it affects transmission rates before going on to the next thing, is this seeming flurry of changes a sign of caving into pressure from people who are saying you've been too slow so far to relax rules and that doing so risks causing carnage to the Welsh economy?
Well, thanks. So look, Adam, it's a balancing act, isn't it, all the time? You've already heard several of the questions I've been asked so far this session have been critical of us not going far enough. Why aren't we doing more for this sector? Why aren't we opening up more there? What we do every time is assess the headroom we have. How much can we afford to do? And then, as you will have seen, we are following the World Health Organization advice and using a step-by-step process. So we're not introducing all those things on next Monday. We'll do one thing on Monday the 22nd, we'll do schools on the 29th, and we will lift the stay local restrictions provided we are able to on the 6th of July. And I think that still demonstrates to people in Wales that while we want to restore freedoms as fast as we can, we are only going to do it in a way that remains careful and organised, to do it in that step-by-step way. And we think we've used the maximum we can of the headroom we have at this moment, but by doing it in the way we're doing it, we think we are still remaining within the boundaries of safe public health practice.
Thank you. Yesterday, virology expert Dinan Pillai, the member of the Independent SAGE, said Wales should be maximising its testing capacity according to a clear strategy. Our officers previously told us that we shouldn't be worried about not using much of the capacity we currently have. It's currently about 12,000. We're not usually using more than 3,000 a day. Why are we still not making more use of what's available to us? And do you accept that this approach appears to be in stark contrast to the World Health Organization advice, which makes a big point about testing?
Well, you will know from those figures, Adam, that we have more tests available in Wales today than at any time during the pandemic, and we will have more tests available again beyond the 12,300 we have today, and we're doing more tests every day. And we will certainly be doing more tests every day next week again. We continue to focus on those areas of particular concern, such as care homes, but we also have to have capacity for testing within our test, trace, protect system. And with local outbreaks of the sort we have seen in North Wales, in Anglesey and in Wrexham, then we have to have tests that we know we can use to deal with those local flare-ups. So again, it is one of those careful balancing acts that we have to maintain, making sure we have capacity, directing that capacity where it will be most useful, and retaining some headroom there too, so that if we suddenly need to do a lot more tests because there is a local flare-up, we can be confident that we've got the resource to do that. The picture will continue to develop, but I think we still have the balance we need here on the testing regime, and we've had 3 very good weeks of our test, trace, protect system in Wales. Diolch, Adam. Across to Will Haywood of Wales Online.
Thank you, First Minister. You obviously considered bubbling up as a measure to introduce now, but decided the time was not right. Can you outline what bubbling up will look like in Wales when it is approved? Can you confirm that when the restriction lifting is announced, social bubbling will be, creating social bubbles will be part of those measures? This would be a real source of reassurance for many people. And on top of that, can you give us some examples of the measures you are considering ahead of the next round of lockdown?
Thank you. So just to be clear, well, I can't give you all the details because we haven't concluded the discussions and we haven't got all the advice that we need. But we will be looking carefully at the arrangements they have in England and the arrangements they've recently announced in Scotland. I had a very good discussion of this with the Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon only on Wednesday of this week. But it's likely, therefore, to involve 2 households, a single household bubbling with another household, giving some relief to those people who have been particularly isolated as a result of the coronavirus restrictions. We will work through that with our Chief Medical Officer and advisors next week, and as soon as we're in a position to be able to provide details for people, then that's what we will want to do. Looking ahead, as you said, so we've announced a whole plethora of things for the next 3 weeks, and we've given an indication to the tourism industry in particular that effort should now be made to reopen self-contained accommodation carefully and safely as from the 13th of July. And we're also giving an indication to hairdressers and people in similar occupations that they too should now think of the next 3 weeks as time to think about how they can reopen, how they can do it safely. We'll be talking to the representative bodies in those sectors. You can't cut hair at a 2 metre distance, so there will have to be some careful safety precautions put in place. But if we can use these 3 weeks productively to have those discussions, and if in 3 weeks' time we continue to see a falling pattern of the circulation of the virus in Wales, we're giving a signal that that part of our economy could resume as well.
Thank you. So just as a point of clarification, in 3 weeks' time, if all goes well, hairdressers could be looking to reopen. And my second question, England has a higher rate of coronavirus than Wales. Would you ever restrict visitors coming into England from Wales? And what about people going to visit family in England, for instance? And how will England having a higher rate of coronavirus affect your ability to control the virus here in Wales?
Well, I'm not attracted to the idea of border controls between Wales and England. There are differences within England that are more significant than the differences between England and Wales. What we will all have to do as our economy and our society reopens on both sides of the border, that as people travel more, the first thing they should ask themselves is my journey necessary? Because the less you travel, the safer you are. And where you decide to travel because there's a good reason for doing so, then you must make sure that you do that in a thoughtful way, having prepared for it, having put the safety measures in place, behave sensibly and responsibly when you arrive at your destination. And I've got just as much confidence that people on the other side of our border think carefully about these things as I have about the way that we think about these things in Wales. And provided we go on doing it in that way, we will go on succeeding. If we all think it's all over and that we just pile back into doing things in the way we always did them, then we will be throwing away all the efforts that we've made together over the last 3 months. And I don't think that individuals and communities across Wales will want to take that risk.
So, sorry, First Minister, just to clarify, if England does have a significantly higher rate of coronavirus, will that affect your ability to be able to control the virus here in Wales?
Well, it will be a factor, of course, but it's an if, isn't it? If they did, would it? If we take all these factors into account, including what is happening along our border. Mike Hughes of LBC, please.
Thank you, First Minister. Can I just pick up on a point that Will raised regarding people coming into Wales? Given where we are now in the year and the season in which the tourism sector relies on, given what you've just said, can you confidently say that Wales will be open to everyone, whether in Wales or outside of Wales, before the summer is out?
Yes, I can say that, Mike, because the minute we lift the stay local restrictions, then travel across Wales will not be restricted. It will not be restricted for people who live in Wales, and it will not be restricted for people who visit Wales either. You'll have seen today that the 4 chief medical officers have jointly lowered the alert level at a UK level from 4 to 3. And that's something that applies across the whole of the United Kingdom. So if we're reopening our tourism economy to welcome people to Wales, that welcome must extend to everybody. Whether you're travelling, as I know many people will, inside Wales to holiday in Wales, or if you're deciding to make your holiday in Wales from outside.
Thank you. On Wednesday, the Minister for International Relations said that the Welsh Government, and I think you've said this previously as well, that the Welsh Government has been comparing notes on a fairly regular basis where possible with other nations regarding the lifting of lockdown restrictions. Throughout this week, Northern Ireland has set out quite a comprehensive roadmap out of lockdown with specific markers all the way up until part of the end of August. Amongst that is relaxing the 2-metre rule within schools down to 1 metre for children. And given what has been said about the transmission among children, is this something that the Welsh Government is considering as a lever to try and fill up classrooms?
Well, just to be clear, we keep everything under review, and we've had very recent advice from our Chief Medical Officer and our scientific group on the 2-metre rule. At this point in the progress of the disease, their advice remains to us that the 2-metre rule should be in place. And when our schools resume on the 29th of June, it will be on the basis that the distance that people need to sustain between one another is 2 metres. Now, if the context changes, if the circulation of the virus continues to fall, if there's just a lot less of it around in Wales, then that will make a difference to the advice that we get, because the advice is always provided in the particular context of the time. And if the advice were to change in future, then the way we've tried to do this in Wales throughout the crisis is we follow the advice. The advice at the moment says to us 2 metres is what we need. And if you halve the distance to 1 metre, you double the risk. But if that changes in future because coronavirus has changed and its prevalence has changed, then we will change our policy as well. Mike, thank you. I think it's over to Rupert Evelyn of ITV.
Hi, thank you, First Minister. Can I just ask you about, to start with, the alert level in Wales? Clearly, do you feel it was safe to drop that today and to add your letter to, or your name as a nation, to all the other nations of the UK?
Well, I don't have any direct say in that at all, nor should I. It's done independently by the 4 chief medical officers. Actually, it's very consistent with what we have announced today. If you think we've had our traffic light system in place, broadly speaking, our red zone has been level 4 on the UK scale. And as I've said, we have moved broadly in many parts of the Welsh economy into the amber zone. And the amber zone is number 3 on the UK list. So while I had no hand at all and was simply informed after the decision had been taken by the chief medical officers to reduce the level at a UK scale to 3, I'm not surprised by that, and in many ways I'm heartened by the fact that what we are doing and what they are saying are very consistent with one another.
Okay, I'm aware my data is a bit iffy, so I hope you're picking up this question, but will you or other members of your cabinet, given what you've said today, be booking hotels in Wales from today, or B&Bs or caravans, or booking a holiday?
Well, I'm certainly personally very much looking forward to being back in Pembrokeshire again. I haven't been able to visit West Wales, which is where I'm from and where my family, many of them still live, ever since coronavirus began. So if we are in a position to reopen the visitor economy, I can tell you absolutely definitely, Rupert, when the chance arises, I hope to take advantage of it. And I'm quite sure that many of my cabinet colleagues will as well.
Would it be a sound decision, to make those bookings?
Well, there is an element of risk.
Today?
There is an element of risk in it. You can't escape that because you are making bookings ahead, and the decision on whether we can move in that direction cannot finally be made until closer to the time. But given what you will have seen on the slide that we put up earlier, the way in which absolutely consistently now admissions to hospital, critical care beds, deaths every day are all reducing, we can take some confidence that we are, on top of the virus, and provided we go on doing the right things, we'll stay that way. People have different levels of appetite for risk, and as I say, my own personal view is if we're able to do so, I'm looking forward to it enormously. Across to Rob Taylor and Wrexham.com.
First Minister, you've referred to the 2 confirmed flare-ups linked to factories in North Wales. At the location in Wrexham, some staff had previously walked out due to coronavirus health concerns, and more recent concerns have been published since. Obviously, the 2 metre rule is in the regulation, but backed with a £60 fine. Are you aware of the previous concerns at the Wrexham site, and are your officials investigating that? And finally, will you be putting some teeth into the regulations along with proactive monitoring?
Rob, thank you. Yes, of course, we are aware of the incidents back in April when staff members drew attention to issues at the factory. I know that the police attended at the time and were satisfied with what they saw at the time, and that the Health and Safety Executive has been involved in the meantime. And I spoke myself yesterday with Unite, the union, about their view of the position in North Wales. Of course, we will now have people more directly involved in the outbreak at Rowan Foods in Wrexham, and we will learn more as a result of the investigations that will be taken forward. Whether we need to do more to toughen or enforce the 2-metre rule, which is in our regulations here in Wales, we've worked very hard with employers who want to make that work and work properly. I'll come to conclusions on that when we know more about the circumstances in Llangefni and in Wrexham.
Thanks. And local authorities have had 3 weeks, perhaps more, to prepare the public realm for Monday's possible shops reopening. We're told the local view is that 3 days' notice is not enough for councils to roll out their plans. Should councils be ready to play their part from Monday, or is a period of perhaps softer opening what you envisaged?
Well, they've certainly not had 3 days, have they, Rob? They've had 3 weeks, because I announced it from this platform 3 weeks ago. Local authorities do have a part to play, of course, in making sure the public realm is ready. And one of the reasons why I think we will see a gradual reopening of non-essential retail in Wales is because in some parts of Wales there is still some more to be done to make sure that the public realm is safe and can support that reopening. But local authorities have a part to play. I've said before here that I think our local authorities have made an enormous contribution over the last 3 months, and there's a contribution for them to make now in making sure that non-essential retail can reopen everywhere in Wales, and to do so in a way that is safe. Thank you. Across to Dan Moffat at Bro Radio. Oh, sorry, apologies. I'm told that it's actually Tom Magna at Carers World who is waiting next.
Thank you, First Minister. You're forgiven. Can I just move to a couple of questions, please? Unpaid family and working carers, like everyone else, are looking forward to getting out within their local area at this stage, but can't do that without feeling 100% sure that the essential respite care coming into their home is fully COVID-19 ready. What assurance can you give about the safety of these essential domestic support services?
Well, thank you, Tom. And of course, it is an essential service for people who are 24-hour carers and often doing, heroic stuff as a result. That for them to have a break, they need people to come in and provide respite care. We have worked very closely with domiciliary care services throughout the crisis. We talk a lot about residential care services, don't we? But actually, there is a huge army of people who provide care for people in their own homes, including respite carers. And the provision of PPE and the safe practice guidance has applied just as much to our domiciliary care staff as it has to people who work in the residential setting. So I hope that where people have respite carers coming into their homes, they will have talked carefully with them and the provider of that respite care to make sure that everything is in its place so that good practice developed here in Wales over the period of the crisis.
And just to follow that up, is there any point of contact or department of the Welsh Government or local authority where you can actually check out a particular care provider in this context to make sure they have the right provisions in place, the provisions that you've just spoken of?
Well, the local authority is definitely the first port of call, because very often the local authority will be commissioning that care themselves and they will be in a direct relationship with the provider. Even if it's an entirely private arrangement, it's very likely that that care provider will be known to the local authority providing services for other people. So if you do have questions and you do have concerns that you want to pursue, your local authority social services department would quite certainly be the first port of call. Tom, thank you very much. I'll go to Nathan Shoesmith at the speaker.
Thank you, First Minister. First, can I touch upon something that is in the changes for Monday? Non-professional elite athletes, including Olympic and Paralympic hopefuls, will be allowed to resume training. To what level exactly is it elite? Is it only the really elite but not professional? And also, are they only going to be allowed to resume training outside, or will they be allowed to train inside as well?
So there are 47 people in this category here in Wales, so you can see that it is confined to the elite level, and each one of those individuals has an individual plan agreed with the Sports Council and their own governing body. That will differ from sport to sport as to the context and the setting, but we are confident, having discussed it with Sport Wales, that all the arrangements are safely in place for those 47 people who compete, Paralympic and Olympic athletes at that elite level, that we can now allow them to go back to get on with their training, and that the necessary arrangements have been thought through and are in place for each of those 47 individuals.
Thank you. And on the sort of 5 mile guideline, again, with retail reopening from Monday and schools reopening in not too distant future as well, before the stay local measure is lifted, what would your view be on if employees of retail and shops decided that they didn't want to return back to work because of this 5 mile message?
Well, the stay local rule has never applied to journeys to work. So there are many people who go to work today in jobs that can't be done from home, who travel more than a 5 mile distance, and that would be no different for people in the non-essential retail world. As you open up more of the economy, more people will need to travel to work. And it's always been one of the exceptions to the rule. When the rule was stay home, and during the time that the rule has been stay local, you've always been able to go beyond that if you're travelling for work purposes, and that applies equally to the new sectors we are opening up from Monday. Nathan, thank you. To Jonathan Hill of the South Wales Argus.
Afternoon, First Minister. You've said continuously over the last few weeks that local communities will be consulted around Wales before the tourism industries in those areas are allowed to get going again. If the local communities in these areas had sufficient opposition to tourism opening, would you withdraw your proposals to reopen on July the 9th?
I think the way that will happen, Jonathan, is through the discussions with local tourist providers. And it is a very important conversation, and it is a conversation government can't have on their behalf. It's for the industry to engage with those local communities. Nothing would be worse for the reputation of the industry than for us to say that Wales is open and people are welcome to travel, to find that they weren't welcome when they got there. So I think this will be self-governing in a way. It's people in those localities that have to have the conversations. It's people in those communities who have to decide. And as I've said, there's a very good basis for that conversation, because so many people who live in those communities are people who work in the tourism industry and who rely for their livelihoods on that industry. So there's a very good basis for those conversations to happen. I spent a long time on Thursday, only yesterday, in a conversation with representatives of the tourism industry, and I know they are very sensitive and sensitised to this issue, and that they will be working hard to make those conversations happen.
Thank you, First Minister. The tourism businesses in Gwent rely heavily on visitor centres, museums, castles opening in particular. A lady who works in the sector in Monmouthshire has said to me that there is no point in her business, which is self-contained tourism. There's no point in her business reopening if these aren't going to reopen beside it. What do you say to that?
Well, as I've tried to say during the whole of this session, there is a journey that we are on here. So some of those sites will be reopening in Wales. Outdoor museums will be able to reopen. Cadw will be working hard over the next 3 weeks to reopen sites where people see them in the outdoors. Not every attraction of that sort is in the open air, and where there are indoor attractions, that will take longer because the risk is greater. But we will see, starting in this 3-week period, a reopening of those sorts of facilities as well, because we know, people come to Wales for a whole variety of reasons, and it's not always to do with being on the beach. It is seeing parts of the heritage that we have here in Wales, and on the journey that we are on to reopening our tourism economy, we will be reopening those things that are safe and will be safe in the next 3 weeks, and then look to see, provided we do that successfully and safely, what we can build on further beyond it. Finally, to Andrew Nuttall of The Leader.
Thank you. So today, with the news that non-essential businesses have had this green light to reopen, we've got people living, what can you say to those that are living sort of further than 5 miles, I know it's been touched on previously, from their nearest shops and high streets, who want to support these small local businesses that are returning, but these travel restrictions remain in place? And just touching on that, can you also clarify what people, so what can these, for people travelling to these businesses that are classed blatantly across all restrictions as non-essential, how can this be argued as essential travel, which is still in place across Wales for work and exercise and things like that?
Well, as I've said already, Andrew, for many, many non-essential businesses, there will be a big population within a 5-mile radius, 5 miles in any direction. If you live beyond a 5-mile radius, you have to have one of the legitimate reasons for travelling beyond it. We've already made it clear that if you don't have a supermarket to buy food within a 5-mile radius, you can travel to it. If you didn't have a pair of shoes and you needed to travel more than 5 miles, that would be okay as well. People have just got to be sensible about it and use their judgment, and know that if we continue to do that, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be able to lift the stay local regulations altogether.
Thank you. And sort of still touching on the topic of business, especially here in our sort of remit of Flintshire and Wrexham, we've had lots of businesses that find themselves in some cases literally on the English and Wales border, and they can see stark differences even a few doors down from one business to another. So in one high street in particular in Flintshire, it starts on one end in England and it will technically end and you're in Wales. So with these sort of small independent business owners, what can these guys do to help recover the local Welsh economy and recoup their lost earnings when just doors down in some cases, their English neighbours have been offering the same services and the same products for almost a week now, but these businesses will be remaining closed until Monday?
Well, they'll be reopening on Monday, Andrew. That's the thing for them, isn't it? They need to look forward to that. They need to make something of it. As I've said, I've been really heartened by the way in which those businesses have prepared to reopen safely. And yes, there will have been a few days difference between what people elsewhere have been able to do and what people along the border in Wales will be able to do. But as from Monday, they will be able to reopen. They will have, in many cases, a very loyal customer base who are looking forward to going back and visiting them. And I hope that they will be able to make the very most of the opportunities that will be there now to reopen the economy in this part of Wales. So thank you very much indeed for that too. Thank you.